Hey everyone, how's it going? Guardian of the Zone back with another banger here. And yes, you did read the title right. I think that David Jaff kind of has a fucking point. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm not even gonna cap. If you don't know, I made a bit of a video. It's my first video on this channel. You can go back and watch it. Um, that saying that David Jaff was kind of a goober. About what he had to say about Ragnarok. If you would like to see that, go watch the video. Um, and he just released this new video, kind of explaining everything, kind of just telling us, here's what I actually meant by that. And honestly, he's got a couple points, and I'm going to point them out. I do think that he does have some things wrong still. Maybe not wrong in a sense, but like I still think he needs to like reevaluate some things that he had said because some things in my mind just don't make sense. I think for me to call him a goober was a little disheartening. It was really upsetting, and that's probably the worst thing I could have called him, and I apologize. But without further ado, let's get into the video.
It's the people that come at me and talk about the evolution of the character and say things like the character grows, that's what characters do, it's plot development or character development, it would be boring if the character stayed the same and all this shit, right? Okay, I want to be clear first of all, and then they kind of layer on top of that this sense that I'm like, which again they can think that I don't care, but it speaks the heart of it, which is as if I don't know, as if I don't understand the value of character development.
So when I said that he had some points, this was definitely not one of them. I think there's something to be said with the people that are calling him an idiot and calling him that saying that he didn't know what character development was. I was one of those people, I think, a little bit in the last video, but no, I do understand that he is a person who is well read. He states like I'm gonna cut it, but he states that he's well read. You know, he reads books and he knows what he's talking about. And I agree. I think that he does know what he's talking about. I think he does know how to make a good character. But I think my issue with it is not that he doesn't know how to. It's he should just understand, as a writer and as a person who has made art, that that's a good thing that he went through an arc. You know what I mean? Arcs are meant to be fulfilling. They're meant to be really easy to follow, and they're meant to be good things. And I feel like him shitting on it is kind of, I don't know. I think, like I said in the last video, but I do think it's a little closed-minded. I think that from an artistic standpoint, he should understand that not all, all good things come to an end.
It's almost like they are so defensive and so protective. And on one hand, I appreciate that, right? I appreciate, when I was a lot younger, like in high school and junior high, I understand that intellectual properties really function as stand-ins for things that might be missing in your life, and you build your identity around this shit, and so you become protective of it. It's unhealthy, uh, and it's best to get over that as soon as you can, but I understand it. And I'm sure some of that is that, because Kratos, whether it's the old one or the new one, the teams have always done a wonderful job building these amazing games that uh, people fall in love with, and I think that's great.
I think that David cooked here when he said that. He's got a really good point with trying to, you know, it has a certain void that fills in, that you're trying to fill into your life, and I think that it is unhealthy to automatically mix video games into the real world. I think that David has a good point here, and it's here where you kind of see that he's not just completely shitting on Santa Monica. He's saying, hey, these people have made some amazing games.
Of course, if you're talking about a novel or a long form television series, not always with that, the kind of storytelling these people are talking about, yeah, I would agree. You want to have, some meaningful arcs happening. You want to have a character starting in one location, emotionally, and over the course of the narrative, we want them to grow and change, and ideally those changes reflect things that we, not necessarily consciously, but we can bring into our lives about their lessons learned and apply them to our lives, you know.
Davey builds me up just to break me down again. He's back on his bullshit about it not being a long narrative. He's saying, if it were a book or if it were this long narrative, it is. It is. And God of War Ragnarok takes what, 30 to 40 hours, and what the other games, the games that he was part of, take like what, 15 hours? It's a completely different story. It's so much more time to develop a character and develop the things that Kratos stands for now, and what he is going through and what he wants to say and what he wants to become.
I took a writing class once where the teacher said the best fiction are basically how-to manuals. It's great stories and adventures and all that shit, but ultimately what you're left with is wisdom that you can apply to your day-to-day life, even if the story was set, in the Lord of the Rings universe. So I get it, but I wasn't talking about that kind of story.
I think prefacing something by saying a person that literally taught me how to write and how to have a good story said this, and then going to contradict it is a little silly. But yeah, that person, the teacher, was right. To having a story that is fiction, by the way, completely fiction, and be able to apply it in everyday life, and want to make people change their life, I think that it's a great thing. It's an amazing thing. And this is the narrative that it is. Now, maybe it wasn't how it started, but that's what it is now. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry, but that's way more impactful. In my opinion, yeah, the God of War game, the other ones were fun as fuck. I love the shit out of those games. But I have not almost cried to those games.
Wolverine or uh, uh, maybe Hulk, but let's just take Wolverine, right? Because that locks in pretty good. There are characters that aren't built and aren't meant to have a level of depth that would fit into like a great book of the year novel or even just a good TV series with that's very long form. Um, Kratos was designed to be kind of a superhero, not in terms of his ethics, but in terms of like how superheroes work.
Here, he's got somewhat of a point that he's correct. I'm sure his intention wasn't for Kratos to become this family man and stuff like that. But I think, honestly, in my opinion, I think artistically and narratively, it is way more impressive to take this character with so much rage and hatred and whatever and make something different out of it. It's super easy to just have the same formula for the next God of War game. What if God of War 4, he was just, oh, I'm mad, so now I'm gonna kill the other gods? That would be, I'm not gonna lie, that game would kind of be shitty. He doesn't want to kill the other gods. He wants to live his fucking life. And I don't know, I think that's a way better narrative and a way better message than it is of the other God of Wars. I think it's easy to forget that God of War is it can't just be, oh, I'm fucking Kratos and I'm mad at everything. I mean, obviously it can be, but like, what's the change? You're saying a character has to go through an arc. What arc? There is no arc at that point. And I feel like his rage arc was perfectly completed at 3, so why don't we just leave it there? Why don't we end things on good notes? I mean, granted, the game didn't end on a good note, but it ended on a note of Kratos maybe trying to understand that what he was doing is wrong. You know, I think there was a good note, ending his rage, ending his lust for blood.
Superman has changed, but he's still Superman over almost 100 years. Same with Spider-Man, frankly. I don't mean Miles and then it was this. I mean just Peter Parker Spider-Man. Uh, Same with Wolverine, right? Same with James Bond. Same with Indiana Jones. And these are beloved characters other than Indy because of some weird thing Harrison Ford doesn't want anybody to ever play the character even when he's dead. These are characters that are beloved that have been viable and successful and lucrative and for decades.
David does have something to say here with the fact that these other stories, Wolverine, Spider-Man, Superman, have been going for decades when they're still baseline the same person. But you gotta understand, these are decades compared to the time span it took from God of War 3 to God of War Ragnarok. The funniest part about this is all of those characters that he's mentioned, Superman, Wolverine, Spider-Man, maybe not James Bond, maybe not Indiana Jones, I'm not too well versed in those IPs, but they have all had Jurassic changes. Even not even like viewing the comic books, even viewing the movies and stuff, Spider-Man 2 was about him having an existential crisis pretty much. I mean, obviously Doc Ock was dope as fuck, but yeah, baseline he's still Spider-Man, but dude, he's dealing with a bunch of mental issues and realizing at the end, oh, I can't just stop what I'm doing, but I have to be better. I have to protect. Almost like a certain bearded god that I know. He has this crisis. He has this moment. He's like, I don't want to kill these gods. And he's like, you know what? I don't want to kill them, but I'm going to do anything to save my son. I think that is a fucking amazing arc. I feel like if you're giving Spider-Man this praise and if you're giving Wolverine this praise, let's take Wolverine for example as well. I mean, if you're not looking at the comic books, even if you're just looking at baseline movies, he has a giant arc. In the beginning, he's this rough, tough dude, wants to be left alone. Fuck you, I hate everyone. You know, then he ends up making friends with the X-Men. He ends up sacrificing himself for a bunch of kids in Logan. I feel like the point kind of falls flat when all the characters that he mentioned have all gone through similar arcs that have honestly improved the characters. I understand that Logan is one continuity and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies are also one continuity, but there are totally other continuities that those movies are based off of in the comic books. I feel like the point falls flat.
And it doesn't mean you're wrong for liking the shift. That's wonderful. That's great. The franchise certainly needed something, and that's one of the ways to go about it. Um, but where you're wrong, though, is making the assumption that one size fits all. And when you're making mainstream entertainment, the idea that uh, one size or one way of doing commercial blockbuster big tent IP, usually you don't want to change too much the fundamentals of the essence of the IP. That's what I was communicating. I was not saying I don't understand why the character got to change. What you mean? What's character arc? What's character development? I know. That wasn't the point. I was actually dealing with something a little bit more nuanced as it comes to the creative process as it relates to marketing and franchising and things like that.
This part of it I also would maybe agree with if I didn't have a different background of looking at artistic projects. I think from a certain standpoint he's right. I think marketing wise, I think whatever else he said, I think that's a good point. Maybe they should have kept a little bit to the roots of it. I agree. But I also think that maybe why is it such a bad thing that they went for it? You know? They they wanted to make something different. They wanted to make a narrative rather than this big blockbuster hit. And it still was a blockbuster hit, don't get me wrong, but I think it was a good thing. I don't understand why it has to have this multi-million dollar lens when it can just be a good story.
All I said was, besides the pacing issues, Ragnarok, because those tricks had already been played in 2018, then you were left, or frankly, Eric and the team was left to deal with this character who, outside of the meta, and oh, isn't that interesting? We've reevaluated the character, and in doing so, that in and of itself is a creative idea. They didn't have any of those rabbits to pull out of the hat, so they were left with the character just as a character.
I do agree that Kratos, to some degree, is more of just a character within the overarching story of Ragnarok, but I also think that's the point. I understand God of War in and of itself is about Kratos and his path through whatever, but honestly, God of War as a narrative, or God of War Ragnarok rather, as a narrative, I think is it benefits more from Kratos just being a character. I think he is nuanced, and I think he does have his way of things, but I don't think it's as interesting as Atreus's arcs. I don't think it's as interesting as Freya's arcs. I don't think it's. But why does that have to matter? If the narrative isn't just about one person, I think using Kratos as a lens to express those is way more nuanced than just making another thing where he has to go through this thing. And I think Santa Monica did well. I think they did all right. Yeah, he was right. They took, whatever from God of War 4. They didn't have these tricks to pull anymore. And so they made that. They made a masterpiece.
The act of changing was the wow factor of 2018. But who he changed into, I do not think is a compelling character. That
I wanted to end the video on this note because I think he has a point with him understanding how character development works, and maybe that he should have this character that's pretty similar to his original status. But I think to say that Kratos isn't a nuance, or sorry, a well character or well written character is silly. It's gooberish, you know. A good example: Kratos in the beginning of the game, Fenrir dies. Kratos says, "We have to train." There's these gods after us. We gotta train. At the end, when spoiler alert, when Tyr is actually Odin, and obviously that affects Atreus heavily. He doesn't go, "Hey, we have to stop what you're doing. We have to train." He goes, "Let's do what you want to do. Let's talk about it. Let's do whatever you want." And I think that's one of the many arcs that Kratos has, making him a compelling character. Overall, I don't hate David Jaff. I he's made great work with the God of War series. And anyone who's watching, please don't send hate his way. I think maybe he should look at creative things through a more creative lens rather than just, this is my character and I wish he wasn't like this. Other than that, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping to make more videos. I do actually have a couple goals this year. Or it's not the end of the year yet, but I have some goals for this year. I want to hit 500 subscribers, which is a crazy, like, I know that's kind of crazy to ask, but I would like that. And I also want to become an affiliate on Twitch. I would say that's my main goal for the year. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay frosty.